Hello and welcome to my new video. This is supposed to be a short tutorial video about sampling and looping. Not drum looping, but the old-fashioned way to expand small samples to continuous notes that you can load into your sampling synthesizer to make them the basis of a sound that you can play all over your keyboard like an ordinary instrument. I use a Kurzweil PC3K as my main instrument, but those techniques are pretty basic and work all over the different brands. The ones of you that grew up with hardware samplers will most likely know all about that. I will do another video later that adds like a second part and describes how to build a key map of those samples and put them into your PC3K. Let's pretend you have an instrument that you'd like to transfer into your sampling synthesizer. In my case, it's a sound from one of my older Yamaha synthesizers. But I am not after an already processed sound. I want the basic waveform that is inside the wave ROM of this instrument. I know my PC3 has much better synthesizer section than this one, and with that I will be able to process this waveform much better and in any way I want. So I simply want to sample the raw waveform. To get that, I program an initialized sound with that waveform as basis. The filter is switched off or fully opened, no resonance, no EQ or effects, no influence of attack or decay phases. Most waveforms in this kind of instruments are laid out like organ tones without decay. That is what I need and what I want to reproduce. Naturally, this step is not necessary or possible with a non-electronic instrument. Now you have to do some planning. One misbelief first. You don't need a sample for every note. Samples are transposed while playing them, but this has limitations depending on technical or audible boundaries. It also depends on the sound you sample and the quality you want to achieve. In my case, I want to transfer a clavy sound with a special flavor that I miss in my Kurzweil. It's a very simple and basic one, and therefore a good opportunity to show the basics. I also expected to use a very small amount of sampling memory. I decide to use 2 samples per octave over 6 or 7 octaves. The notes will be transposed to a point where the zone of the neighbor starts, and so on. They will be arranged on the keybed this way, and joints can be set later, depending on how smooth the transition sounds. Usually, the lowest note can be transposed down to the limit where it still makes sense to use it, so I can use the lowest sample to span an octave down or more. Naturally, you can use more samples to fill the span in between. With a natural instrument you can gain quality with more samples, but for this kind of sound it makes no sense. Especially on all the ROM wave synthesizers you can hear the slight step between sample zones, because they have been crafted exactly the same way. The synth is simply connected to the audio in of my sound card. No digital magic here. To record the samples I use Audacity. It's an easy-to-use, pretty good and free audio editor for simple recording and editing. You may use what you like. The quality settings are 48 kHz and 16-bit mono, since the basic wave is mono anyway. Those values are not top quality, but sufficient and match the setup for my simple clavy. Let's pretend we have done all the sampling and we have a WAV file recorded with the notes according to my plan. It should look something like this. You can see, due to the character of the sound, there is a descending attack phase with a non-descending sustain until I let go. This sustain phase is the already looped part of the waveform and how it was stored in the memory of the Yamaha synth. This makes it easy for me to loop it, and for you to see the basic understanding of a clean loop. I saved my recording and loaded it into another program I also like to use for that. Wavo Saw. It's also free, and what's best, the loop points I set here will be recognized by my Kurzweil PC3K later. I advise you to save your recording 2 times with different names. Overriding it accidentally might happen right now in this process, and you don't want that. Guess why I know. In Wavo Saw I pick the current sample that I want to work on, and I delete the silence in the beginning and the portion of the end, because I don't need that. The loop can be set quite short here, somewhere after the descending sample changes into the stable sustain. While you look at it, you can see some repeating structures. Since this is a quite flat and cheesy sound, you can simply take several cycles of the repeating oscillation and loop them. To find the proper loop points, take a closer look at it. We need to find a zone in that structure where start and end points look the same, or as close as possible, so that the starting point of the loop just continues in the same fashion as the end point has ended. It's best to look for zero crossings, but this is not a must. Both points must have the same level of the rising or descending wave, and they also have to continue the heading of the wave. If we don't care for that, the loop will have a crackling or clicking sound, depending on the length of the loop. With bigger samples, long loops, and today's software, we have lots of ways to join non-matching loop points anyway. But despite all technology, it might sound different. I decide to use that zone as the looped area. Look at the end and the start structure and how the wave looks around the area. They are as close as twins. Listen to the loop. You need a smooth transition between the first and the looped part. Also listen for clicking or humming sounds. With such a simple wave, it is usually enough to shift one of the loop points 1 or 2 steps forward or back. While you do this more often, you will get experience with that. Also, all this work can be done later inside your sampling synthesizer, but I find it more comfortable to do it on my computer. Wavo Saw is not the most convenient program for that, but as I mentioned, after some testing I found out it saves my waveforms in a way so that my PC3 recognizes the loop and it is free available. After setting the loop points, I delete the rest of the wave and save it. Important advice: give it a name that lets you identify it on first glance. You will need it later. Repeat that with all the notes you have recorded and you are done. Now you have a pool of samples. With those you can build your key map, or whatever it is called by your sampling synthesizer manufacturer. Have fun!